So, hello friends. Today we have on our show David Fox, who is a seasoned Scrum Master and an enterprise agile coach as well. So he worked with the clients like PayPal, Tele2, and T-Mobile, to name a few. And I had a privilege of working with David in the IT transformation journey at T-Mobile. And with my experience with him, I must say he's extremely knowledgeable Scrum Master. So if you are already a Scrum Master and you really want to switch into a role of agile coach or preparing for Scrum Master interview, stay with us. So welcome David on Career Talk and many thanks to share your experience with our viewer.
Thank you for inviting me.
So yeah, so David, why don't you share your journey, how you started as Scrum Master, how your transition happened from your previous role to a Scrum Master? Can you just share with us?
So I think can't remember the year, but it was about 10 years ago. We had a new CEO in the company one day. Back then it was a company called Tele2. And there was a large all IT meeting, and she said, okay, everybody, you're now Scrum organization. And people were like, what's Scrum? We were used to working waterfall. And I myself was a business analyst, so I would actually go do designs. I'd meet with all the stakeholders, the usual waterfall stuff, or do a handover to IT 2-3 months later. You'd then start testing it, and then there are a lot of questions to come back to the business analyst. What did you mean by this? What did you mean by this? That was 2-3 months ago. A lot of times I'd forgotten what I'd written down, like almost completely. So the whole idea of jumping to some much shorter cycle was extremely strange to us, but it was also very exciting. And I was struggling to find my role in a Scrum team as a business analyst, and I made it known to my manager that I was curious to explore the Scrum Master role because in my mind back then, it looked similar to a business analyst. Of course, that's completely wrong, but that's what I thought at the time. So I did the training, got a team, and started as a Scrum Master from there. Doing it all the wrong way, of course, but that was
Yeah,
my
that's
start as a
how
Scrum
most of the
Master.
people learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Good. So that's great. Okay, so just tell us, like, okay, apart from your training, did you also done a couple of certifications, or what kind of challenges you faced as a Scrum Master when you done this transition from a BA to Scrum Master?
So I think, in general, the start, um, people struggle. What exactly is a Scrum Master doing? And you can also fall into these particular roles, trying to do your best. Whether I'm guilty of a few of them myself. Being a Scrum policeman. Quickly pointing out to people that's not the way it's supposed to be. And frequently I'd be wrong, but it was my opinion. So I was acting like a Scrum policeman. And then in meetings, I'd actually control the meeting instead of letting the people talk and learn and experience for themselves and work through the problems for themselves. Impediments were how well I could solve the impediment. So the better I could understand the problem and actually fix it myself, became to me the better of a Scrum Master I was. Also being a friend to everybody in the team, like getting them coffee, making sure that they took their lunch and didn't work too much overtime. Also managing them directly, stepping in, um, being the in-between if conflict rose up, instead of actually being more of a facilitator or more of a coach. The key accountable things of a Scrum Master, I didn't focus on them. When I say the key accountable things, I mean things like the coach, the facilitator, the actual servant leader part of it. Those things I didn't focus on at all. A change agent, um, possibly mentoring a little bit, getting the team to manage them and actually be able to cope without me. I wasn't focusing on those types of things at all. So they were my key challenges at the very beginning, and actually I struggled for a long time with those. And I think the biggest turnaround I got, I studied Toyota, I studied SAFe, less, but it was all how well I understood it and then how I tried to teach it to the team. But I think the biggest turnaround in my career became when I started focusing on how to facilitate a meeting and how to coach. Because I was looking around other Scrum Masters, and there were some Scrum Masters I knew more than them, but they had much better teams than me. And I saw how they were focusing on facilitating meetings and actually getting the person to think, or the team to collectively think. And sometimes allow the team to make mistakes, but learn from their mistakes and move forward. Once I started that, it's actually quite easy to take what you apply to the team, actually to the organization. So the coaching aspect of a Scrum Master was my biggest challenge. It took about 5 years for me to realize that.
Yeah, it's a quite time, but I would say now you are champion in that, because I have already worked with you, and the way you interact with your team, and the way you be that much proactive and helping your team is really good. I must say you are doing a fabulous job now, at least. So I don't see those negative attributes which you just talk about. So maybe that's a thing of the past. So good work on that, David, at least.
Thank you.
Okay, so now let's say you are, I'm sure you already have doing a lot of interviews for other Scrum Master. So what you will look out in a candidate when you will interview a candidate for a role of a Scrum Master?
So I primarily look out for particular scenarios that I've faced myself and see how they would deal with them themselves. So how they deal with conflict in the team, what big successes they've had. But I would also check to see how they would do their day to day. Are they repeating some of the mistakes that I made, particularly as a junior Scrum Master? But I'd also try and find out, I try and dig in to their answers to get them to develop their answers as much as possible. But the thing I most focus on is how they coach, because it's how you coach really determines how well the team learns. We're not in school. I like to point that out. I pointed that out to you as well when we worked together. We're not in school, so you can't teach the team. You can teach them a little bit, but they have a job to do. So a lot of it relies on how you coach the team to trigger the question themselves, to trigger how they learn. So I focus on those things and actually look for examples from a Scrum Master, how they do it, and name time in the past and that they've done this, and did they use any particular facilitation techniques.
Okay, good. So now in this difficult time of COVID pandemic, what are the new challenges which you faced as a Scrum Master and how you dealt with them? Can you just share some of the example?
Right. So actually, things got easier for me in the COVID pandemic as a Scrum Master.
You are the first person who is telling me this.
Right. So, the scenario we've all experienced before, whether you're Scrum or not, is you're in a meeting room, and there is one projector or one computer, and there's one mic in the middle of the table. And chances are, if you're a split team, the other half of the team can be in the other location, all sharing the one camera, the one mic as well. So if a question or anything pops up, one person's asking the question and one person's answering the question. So the meeting is stopped while this question takes place. So if you want actually to develop people through or develop their train of thought, that's stopped in that scenario. Now, because everybody's joined by their own computer, what you can do is with the Teams functionality with breakout rooms or Zoom breakout rooms, you can actually split people up. And if a person has an issue or a question, you can split them up with somebody who can answer the question, whether it's you or somebody else. I think you're on mute.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So the meetings actually run quicker, and you actually allow for parallel conversations, and you actually allow people at their own pace to work through whatever problem they have. Whereas when everyone's in the one room, you don't
So
have any
it's a
opportunity
blessing
for
in
that.
disguise for you as a Scrum Master, rather than challenges you are telling with advantage.
Because all my problems went away with COVID. There are some instances where, like for big room events, where you would really want to have everyone in the same room. Some techniques are easier and actually quicker, but in general,
Now
COVID made
we
them
used to
easier.
do PI planning, right? That big room and 100 of people are just coming. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and you can see everybody on one side is watching; they're not participating. Whereas now everybody's virtual. Now everybody's in the same scenario, and everybody's working from offshore. So the meetings tend to be more focused on how do we focus in this scenario, where previously it was, okay, let's cater for onshore people and the offshore people will follow. And the feedback would always be the same. We want more engagement from offshore. Well, now we're walking a mile in your shoes, so now we understand it, and it's easier to actually get more engagement. Some of the challenges, though, are there are times where you actually would want people to be in the same room because it's just faster. Not being able to see the conversations unfold is a big thing that I miss as a coach, because sometimes you want to see a mistake being made to actually make sure they wait and examine whatever they're examining again, or hold them to go and see the problem some more until they're triggered to see their mistake. You can't see that. That can be more difficult.
Yeah. True. Okay.
But I do think COVID has been better for me as a Scrum Master.
Okay. Good. Okay. So my next question is about agile maturity of a team or a project or an organization. So how we can measure the agile maturity?
This is something that comes up a lot, actually.
Okay.
So I've been in a lot of work groups with deliberators. How do we measure performance of a team? And it generally comes round to you can't. Although I really disagree with that. There are a few techniques, but you really have to understand the purpose behind those techniques. If you don't understand the purpose behind those techniques, all your metrics are going to be wrong or misunderstood, and a misunderstood metric is not valuable at all. So how you'd measure the maturity of an agile team?
Like team happiness index or something which you can talk about.
So the engagement actually goes a long way, but you also need to measure the result. So you can't use a metric in isolation. You have to actually consider the overall system, and you can actually use a few techniques to get the organization to measure what's important to them. So you could use a big room technique where you'd look for what are the maturity markers that the organization thinks exist in their own organization, and then get that organization to rate how good they are in terms of the maturity. But I would always look for the ones that are valuable to the organization and not impose external ones. So I'd always engage the organization to see what's valuable to them and why it's valuable, and then get them to rate those. And I would use something called the eco cycle, the liberating structure eco cycle, with Panarchy to rate their maturity on the markers that they identify, get them to rate them on maturity, and if there's any immature ones, according to them, then see what types of steps or plans they can put in progress to make them more mature. But metrics out of a box, you should not use.
Yeah.
Like, all I can say is, for example, a lot of people think the purpose of Kanban is to get the work in progress to 1. And if you think that, well, then you've misunderstood the purpose of Kanban.
True. Yep. Okay. So I would like to ask you, and this is again very frequently asked question about conflict at workplace. So how as a Scrum Master, you will deal with the conflict within your team, with your, let's say, PM, supervisor, or with your client stakeholder? Can you just share some of your experience, some example?
So conflict within the team, I've dealt with this a lot, and well, the number one thing is I will not become a middleman to deal with conflict between two people. When I say that, I mean I won't take the complaint from one person and then go to the other person and say, look, you've got this issue, you need to do something, and then be taken back. I won't do that at all. If people want me to deal with a referee like that, well, then first I want the team to agree themselves what are the rules to their game. So what behaviors must they do in order to achieve their purpose, and what must they absolutely not do when trying to achieve that purpose. And once they've agreed upon those behaviors, those principles, if you would, then if I see somebody breaking those principles, well, then I can objectively go to that person and say, okay, you're breaking the principles, and check, do they want to work on these principles, want to work on their behavior to try and resolve it. And sometimes it may be actually putting 2 or 3 people together to discuss with them what they can do to improve it. But ultimately, the question I ask that person is, do you want to be in the team? Do you want to work on this? If they don't want to work on it, well, then the team is not for them. So you need to be really clear on what the purpose of the team is and if it suits that individual. So, but I do not become a middleman. I always facilitate the discussion.
Yeah. And what about your interaction or some conflict with your superior, or let's say someone who is higher in hierarchy? So any of that kind of experiences?
Normally, so there's a particular scenario I have in mind where, a team is delivering late and pressure comes down from senior management. And of course, it comes to the Scrum Master. Why can't you do this? What about this? And in these particular scenarios, the team is afraid, the managers are angry, and it generally becomes not a fun place to work in. So in this scenario, again, I don't middleman anything here. I make it really clear to everybody what's actually happening. So instead of the manager doing his own investigation or the team complaining to me or complaining to the product owner, I'm working on making the transparency clear with the product owner. So making sure that the product roadmap is clearly reflected in the backlog, and any changes that the team have based on delays or what they're learning new is clearly reflected in both as well. So that people have a clear set of facts to have a discussion on. And once the set of facts are clear to have a discussion on, then start engaging the parties who are involved in the conflict. So if senior management is involved with conflict with the team, first they need to have a clear set of they need to be clear to understand what the situation is. And then generally what you find is when people understand the scenarios completely, they learn something new, and they start working with each other and actually resolving the conflict themselves, normally by progressing beyond whatever impediment is blocking the project. So in this scenario, then instead of management actually complaining towards me, they're actually then working with the team. And a lot of time they're very, very happy, and actually tell the team they're very happy just to have clear, concise information on what's really happening. And that leads to everybody being happy. That leads to the team being happy and leads to the managers being happy. People like working with each other, and they're now working with each other to resolve and move forward with the project.
Okay, great, David. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a situational question. So let's say you have been hired as a new Scrum Master, and the team you are going to work with does not have any experience in Agile. So how do you influence or motivate them to use Scrum?
So, well, number one, make sure that the team understands the purpose, their purpose, why they're there, but then also make sure the team understands what the purpose of Scrum is. And there's only one way to do that, and that's actually get the team to read the Scrum framework and actually work out together what does the Scrum framework mean to their current way of working? Get them to document that and write it down and be clear about it. Form a team charter, a way they're working. And even if some ways are not strictly within the Scrum framework, that's fine. It's now clear what the team is going to do, and they've discussed what are the possible pros and cons of working like this. And once it's clear to me as a Scrum Master what way they're then going to adopt Scrum, then at least I know what steps or where to take steps closer towards the Scrum framework in the future. So in the retrospectives, you can always ask the question, okay, what makes sense to do now in terms of becoming more mature in Scrum? But I would not act as a Scrum policeman saying it should be like this, it should be like that. You will be the team. I'm sure there's been thousands. I'm sure every team has seen 5 or 6 Scrum Masters doing that exact mistake. You really want to get the team thinking, what is the purpose of this event in Scrum? Why is it there? What can we use in that event and why would we do it differently? What makes sense in our context to do? And once that's clear, then you actually, start charting the way towards what makes sense to do next. And generally, the team can actually feel like they're succeeding in fixing their problems like this instead of imposing a problem because you've copied Scrum without really understanding it.
Okay.
So that's what I have actually done with a few teams as well. And there's a nice way to do it where I would hand one page of the framework to one person and one page to another person and so on. I'd get them to read their page to understand it. Then I tell them to find the rest of the framework amongst their colleagues, except their colleagues are not allowed to hand them the page. The colleague has to summarize the page to the person and vice versa. So they end up actually studying with each other. And once that study is complete, then break into the questions. What makes sense to do now? Why is it different? What does that mean for the steps we're doing now and how we're implementing Scrum?
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so I have one more situational question for you. So let's say again you've been hired as a new Scrum Master, and this project is already delayed by 2 months, and there are a lot of dependencies. So as a Scrum Master, what you will do in a similar situation?
So I have been in this scenario before, and a lot of times people come up to you, particularly if you're hired in as an external Scrum Master, that you're this expert who comes in and knows the answers to everything that happens. Well, simply by attempting to answer those questions without engaging the team, you shouldn't do, but also it's impossible to do immediately. What you have to do is start making it really clear to everybody what's actually happening. So take a look as a Scrum Master what the problems are, the entire system, understand it as a whole, then take that back to the team or the other parties involved in it, and then get them engaged in solving it bit by bit. And that's what happened in the current work on. People come up to me and said, the PO's not doing this, or the program's not doing this, or we have no idea what's going on. How can we help? Managers were asking me, the senior managers that hired me were asking me, what's going wrong? What are your observations? Almost like I'm this sort of magical crystal ball that can fix everything.
Superman.
Yeah, almost like I'm Superman.
And you can do anything.
Yeah. And just by getting the holistic view of the system and taking that back to all parties involved, once they get more information, you can start to see that they start solving problems on their own, and it's actually a really nice feeling when they fix some of the problems, and I have no clue what the fix was. I just guided them through what they learned. And a lot of the times I'm completely disconnected from the actual fix. I just check a few of the basics. Is this problem really been fixed? How do you know that the problem is there? Who else may have fixed this problem? Just coaching questions. So then you start to see like the team accelerates towards fixing their problems. And in this particular scenario, what we had then was the team was thinking that, okay, the product owner is not willing to try and do these fixes. But now actually the product owner is one of the biggest evangelists in saying, yes, let's fix this because actually it really truly is valuable. It's not this should be valuable if we fix this. It's like, we know this will be valuable when we fix this. So I'm not pushing that should be valuable. The team is coming up to fixes on themselves. That was a particular scenario we're in where a project we're late right now. We're still behind, but we're actually now starting to accelerate fixing the issues. Yeah. We're still behind, but that's
at least we know the path exactly where we have to head.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah. So next one for you, again a scenario question. So let's say your team has missed the release deadline, which will definitely going to impact other dependent project activities. So as a Scrum Master, what will be your next steps? What you're going to tell your team, or how you do the retrospective? What will be your next steps?
So I guess the first thing as a Scrum Master do is make sure that the information the team is saying is clearly understood by the stakeholders. So I would help them with the review with the product owner to make sure the right people come into the review. But I'll also take a look at the purpose of the review is clearly understood by the attendees, not just the team. Because part of the purpose of the review is, you know, where are we now and what makes sense to do next. So you really do want the stakeholders engaged in that where are we now. You don't simply want to do a presentation or even just a demo. You want to collectively re-examine what makes sense to do now. So in the terms of the release deadline, something is going to change on your backlog, on your product roadmap. The review is the ideal place to signal that needs to be discussed. Or even if you're doing a proper review, discuss it in the review and decide together what to do next. So my first steps as a Scrum Master will be to facilitate that review, actually take a look at how that review is going to run, and make sure that we can actually ask the right questions in the review to make those things happen.
Okay. And this is the last one for you, and a very important one. How you measure success of a Scrum Master. I'm sure you might have heard this n number of times, but what is your take on that?
So I guess you always need to consider the results of the team as well. Excuse me 1 second, got a notification. Is the project successful or is the product successful? That would be the number one check. You can't actually consider, you can't ignore that. But then I got so many pop-ups, sorry. But then, you know, how capable is the team, or how much have they learned? You know, can the team continue this work without Scrum Master being there? That's the number one check. Has the team learned to do that Scrum Master? It's almost like, has the Scrum Master, has the level of intelligence of the team increased so much that they now no longer need someone to act as a Scrum Master? You might need somebody accountable to check the team have these issues and step in on occasion. But if you get a team to raise to that level where they're practically self-managing with no input from Scrum Master, that's how I would measure the success of a Scrum Master.
Okay.
If that can be achieved.
Yes, that will be really a good one. And we all dream of having that kind of team where we can just came out and maybe we can serve other teams. But yeah.
No,
Okay,
it's nice to step into a team that has that, but it's also nice to create a team like that.
absolutely. It's like a dream team for anyone to be the part of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so interesting conversation with you, David. And thanks a lot. And definitely, I'm going to call you again. Yeah, it's just difficult to get your time. So, again, thank you very much for providing us this opportunity to have this lovely conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. I look forward to talking to you again. It was nice talking to you.
Yeah.